Today's guest is a friend of mine, Bronnie Ware, and you may have heard that name before. She has sold over 1 million copies of her first book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, and she has just released her latest memoir called Bloom. Bronnie and I are good friends, and it's such an honour to be able to sit down and take some time out and just share her journey with you. We don't get deep into her story as in like where she was before she wrote her latest book. This is really the journey of writing a book and I wanted to explore this because this is where I am right now. You know, I think those lessons in surrender and acceptance are huge and sometimes even more powerful than a lifetime's journey. You know, I think sometimes when you are committed or devoted to your own personal and spiritual growth, things can happen very quickly and a lifetime can be crammed into 5 years. And that's really this story. You know, this is a story of surrender. It is a story of reaching and then moving through upper limits. And so I'm really stoked to be able to share this with you. May I introduce to you my dear friend, Bronnie Ware. Oh, and if this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you enjoy the show. Be sure to hit subscribe because you're going to want to hear more. And now, for real, on with the show. Welcome to Carlosophy's Stories Behind Success. I'm Carly Nimmo. It's so easy to fall into comparisonitis as an entrepreneur, and it can be paralysing. In my own journey, I've come to understand that regardless of your level of success, fame or fortune, we're all suffering from the same stories of fear, struggle and failure. So let's talk about it.
Well, I've just put out my third book, which is Bloom, and the subtitle sort of sums up the last 5 years or so for me, and that's a tale of courage, surrender, and breaking through upper limits. And that's where I've been in recent years. And, you know, I feel so grateful for the challenges that life threw to me. But sitting here now, even just waiting for us to connect for the interview, I've got some flowers on my desk, as I always do, because that's a little bit of pampering and that I do these days. And they're just daisies. They're just like yellow daisies. And I was just sitting here staring into one of the flowers and getting all tearful because of the perfection of the flower, which led me to thinking about the perfection of life. And so for me, I just find nature is such an amazing teacher. And yeah, so I'm sitting here thinking, I cannot believe that so many lessons have been thrown my way. Just over 5 years ago, I became a first-time mum at 45. I conceived my daughter naturally and quickly at 44, which is incredible. I'd never been pregnant before and didn't know if I could. And it was a bit of a ride. During the pregnancy, I realised that I couldn't stay with her father, and so I left the relationship. So from the moment my daughter was born, I was a solo mum. I'd spent 14 years trying to get my work out there and earning a living. And my first book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, had taken off just before my daughter Eleanor was born. And it took off to the point that I was in labour and doing interviews from my hospital bed. And it was just getting absolutely ridiculous. And my publisher, or my dream publisher, contacted me within 24 hours of my daughter being born and offered me a publishing deal. It was, I could really embellish that story because it was amazing, but I think what has followed in the last 5 years is even more important. So I left the hospital with a gorgeous little girl and a publishing contract. And my book then went out into 29 languages, and it's since had the film rights sold and everything else. So it's been a huge journey. But as soon as Eleanor was born, I started getting some aches and pains in my hands and feet. And a few weeks after that, within a month and a half of becoming a mother, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. So I had these three things happen all at once: the baby, the success of the first book, and the disease. They're all entwined. And if it hadn't been for the success of the book, I couldn't have supported my child and surrendered to the disease in the way that I have. So it actually got to the point where I was so crippled up that I was using wheelchairs at airports, and I was shopping for walking sticks and looking at hiring a wheelchair and a carer just to go out to things like the markets and whatnot. And, you know, figured if I was going to have a walking stick, it was going to be a groovy one. So I was, you know, looking up all the funky walking sticks if you're going to have a walking stick. And
might as well do it in style.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so through that journey, I just learnt to surrender. I had to surrender because the pain was so intense and the pressures in my life were so intense, and I was raising a little girl through all of this, that I just learnt layers and layers of surrendering, and each layer was a new one. So in each moment as I surrendered, it was full and whole in that moment. But then I'd have to surrender again further down the track. And it wasn't that the first act of surrender wasn't complete. It was in its moment. But it's another layer of healing and another and another. It's like, oh, you're
when
joking. Yes. But I came through, and it's a long journey, which I do share, a long and amazing, wonderful journey that I do share in Bloom. And I went to the absolute depths with my health, and then I got my mobility back to the point that I now jump on a trampoline and ride a bike. And despite having other physical limitations still, you know, that's a continuing healing journey. I just feel so incredibly grateful because the lessons that have been given to me have brought me into my best self and have made me so grounded in who I am, have kicked the butt on upper limits, and just allowed me to learn how to receive. That's been a huge one, to truly receive on all levels, but also just to accept that the moment that we're in is actually perfect for our journey. And yeah, that we're actually given these lessons from a place of love. So, you know, I sit here now, I've got a 5-year-old who's over the moon because I've let her go on the iPad while I'm having this interview because we have restricted screen time in our house, and she's just an adorable little being, and I live in a simple, sweet little house that I've bought, and I've made so many choices along the way based on keeping my life as simple as possible. And my first book sold around 1 million copies now, and I could be mammoth on, you know, in so many ways professionally, but I've actually come back to what I really want, and what I really want is the life I've got. I travel regularly, I have time with my daughter, I have time with my friends, my beautiful Carly included, and I do what I want. I have a lot of love in my life, and every step of growth, I'm not averse to growing in my career. I just don't strive for it. I let it unfold organically and support it in ways that I feel guided to support it, but I don't support it in the traditional professional expected ways. I just get on with living my life so that I'm not going to have regrets at the end, because this is my life, not, you know, the life I want to portray in public. Yeah. So that's it. I sit here as a contented woman with the 5-year-old over the moon stuck on an iPad in the lounge room.
Love it. We're all human. So I've got so many questions, but the first one that okay, so I actually just, as you know, was just on a call with my writing coach because I'm writing a book myself. So I feel like we're going to talk a little bit about this today because it's definitely where I'm at. So timely that we're having this chat. And one thing that kind of came up while we were talking was you, actually, and your success and luck and chance. well, I want to know what you think about luck and chance, because you had, at the very beginning, you had said that you had worked 14 years to get your work out in any kind of, big way. And I think so often we can see someone who has success like you've had with Top 5 Regrets, where it's almost like a fairy tale. You wrote this book and you wrote a blog post and it went viral, and you wrote this book and then Hay House come knocking, and it's like, there's a lot of people out there who would go, well, that's good luck. Like, that's actually lucky. But from where I'm sitting, it's not necessarily luck.
No, well, it took me 14 years to become an overnight success. So that's not lucky. And the journey, those 14 years they just stretched me in so many ways to stay committed to getting my message out there. Initially, that was as a singer-songwriter who hated performing and being in front of people. So, I really did stay committed to the journey. What I think about luck and chance, that they're not that at all. I think it's timing and readiness. And I actually write about that a lot in my new book, that behind the scenes, so it can look like I'm not doing much and I'm just lucky. But behind the scenes, what I'm doing and what I've always done is doing the inner work and doing the real work and growing into a place of readiness at the pace that I can handle and that life is trusting I can handle. And then when you do that, that's the real work, because it brings you into a place of readiness where you can then enter. So I came, with an unedited, very personal, raw book, and I just came straight in at that level, and it wasn't luck. It was the fact that I was ready for that level of success. I'd written the actual blog post 6 months before it went viral, and it was on my website, and a few people shared it here and there and asked could they share it. But it was it may have even been like 8 or 9 months later that the blog took off. And in that time, I went through suicidal depression. I'd finished looking after dying people. Then I was teaching songwriting in a jail. And then all of a sudden, life wanted me to start learning how to receive and how to allow things to me instead of just giving and giving and giving. And so even though the blog that started all this in motion, even though it was written and it was in the public sphere already, it didn't take off until I was ready. And it actually took off almost as soon as I said, okay, life, I'm ready to get back into living. What's the next step? And then, boom, it took off. So, we can do the work, but it doesn't matter how much we do in the physical thing, in physical appearances, because that's irrelevant, and how we're perceived by other people is irrelevant. What is relevant is the work we're doing behind the scenes and bringing ourselves into a place of readiness. And then when we do that, then it's the timing, so that the two align, and boom, the night before my daughter was born, I sent out the strongest prayer and basically said, send me some help now, otherwise I'm quitting. I'm not going to do this book anymore. I'm 45 years old. I've been blessed to become a mother. My daughter's on her way. I'm going to be present with my kid. I am going to give up this career, no matter the fact that I've spent 14 years committed to getting this message out there. I'm over it. And I meant it with complete conviction that I can't do this. I cannot serve two masters. I need some help, and I will quit now, and the next day Hay House rang me, and boom. So that's the timing side of it. I was ready. I'd got myself to that level where I was ready for,
because like it's almost like we have to be ready to walk away from it, or sometimes it feels like that, right? Like, and I guess that is the surrender part that you talk about, is that and it's definitely the theme that I'm exploring myself, is like, and I feel like a bit of a depressionist when I say this, but it's like, what really matters?
Yes.
Is it that you're as big as Oprah, or is it that you're experiencing love in your life? Like, what is it that actually matters to you? Because I think so often, and you mentioned this just before as well, we have this idea of success, and so we're striving after this idea of success, but then when we get it, it's kind of like, or if we get it, it's kind of like, oh, okay, what next?
Well, that's right. I mean, what matters? And that's a brilliant question, Carly, because we need to ask ourselves that all the time. And I think that one of my biggest blessings is the fact that I've been around death so much, and I've faced it, and I've also gone through, going close myself a couple of times, once through suicide and once through a car crashing really close to us in the last couple of years. But I just, the more we can consider ourselves on our deathbed, and not knowing how long away that is, but the more we can sort of think, okay, if I was looking back on my life now, what would really matter? And so for me, I've been around that, and I've seen the anguish that regret causes dying people. And it's so tangible for me that it gives me the power to not care what other people think of me, and to know what matters. And what matters is space in my life. It's more important to me to have space just to hang out with my kid, hang out and do the things I want to do, than to be perceived as hugely successful, as long as I've got enough money to create the life I want. And, I do have a relatively simple life, other than a little bit of business class travel now and then.
Which you're totally entitled to.
Absolutely. It's a great question. We have to get back to what matters, and the more, the greatest freedom is letting go about how we're perceived by others, because then we can actually honour what matters, and that takes a lot of courage, because we can all be so influenced by how we'll be perceived. But if we actually consider ourselves looking back over life, it does give us the courage to really not care and just be perceived however we're perceived. It really makes no difference, as long as we know we're doing the work and we're honouring our calling to be the best self we are and the happiest self we are. Then that's what matters.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, on our deathbed, I really like that framing, because it just strip away the bullshit, right? It's like, because you're not going to be, chances are, I can't say for everybody, but I know that I'm not going to be lying on my deathbed thinking about what everybody else thought of me.
No, you won't even, no, exactly, you won't. You'll just be thinking, I'm so glad I spent that time with my daughter. I'm so glad I did this for myself. I'm so glad I was brave. I'm so glad I was courageous. That sort of stuff is way more than, oh gosh, I wish, I hadn't said that stupid remark and it all got taken the wrong way and whatever. It's like, oh, whatever.
Totally. You just got to let it go. So before we hit record, I've been talking about my cash flow issues, and you had said that you were kind of obviously empathetic as to where I was at, but you were also quite excited because you knew that this was just another unfolding, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I kind of just want to explore that a little bit, because part of me feels conflicted, because we are told that, ease and flow and all that kind of jazz, and that maybe life doesn't have to include suffering. It's like, I don't know, it's like we can look at other people and see them living this life that looks really, graceful and flowing and easeful. But then everyone I know who has had something really impactful to say has been through suffering. So I want to just explore that a little bit, that idea of suffering versus ease and flow, and do they both have to exist, or can we just have one without the other?
Oh, in an ideal world, we can just have ease and flow. But to be our best self, to allow that, we have to suffer to get cracked open, I think. And so those who appear to have ease and flow, they're either just keep, it's only on the surface, they're still suffering behind the scenes, or they've already suffered immensely, or they will. I don't think that any of us can avoid suffering. I mean, we all have pain, but it's our choice how long we stay in the suffering of that pain. The pain and the growth will always be there. And so for me, that's where surrender is such a beautiful thing, because you give up resistance to the pain, and the suffering lessens because you're not resisting the learning and the pain that's there. You accept that this is where things are at, and that the lessons given to you from a place of love, and so the suffering, it's optional to a degree. I mean, until you get to that point in yourself where you can lessen the resistance, there'll always be suffering. But as you learn, you develop your strength of surrender, your skills in surrendering. Until then, there will be suffering. But as you strengthen those skills, suffering becomes so much more minimal, even though there's pain and there's learning and you're being stretched and I don't want to be going through this. But at the same time, you also know, but I'm going to go through it. And the less resistance I have to it, the more ease and flow actually waits on the other side. And
yeah. And I guess the faster we move through it too, right? Like one thing that I've definitely realised over the last few years is I've felt like I've grown exponentially in that period of time, but very quickly. Like 6 months is like 6 years of the old me. Because I just go into things and I'm like, well, yeah, I feel less resistance around them. I still feel resistance. I'm certainly not there yet, wherever there is. But I move through it way quicker because I just dive into it instead of trying to avoid it. I feel like a lot of us spend a lot of time turning away from the strain, when if we just faced it, we'd know what we were dealing with, and there would be less of those demons kind of hanging around us.
Absolutely. So, we can look at something and think, put all our energy into how to get around it, and that's a lot of energy back and forth. But eventually you just got to go through it instead of trying to put all your energy into avoiding it and getting around it. And so if you get to that point where you're looking at this challenge, this mountain, and you can sort of think, okay, I'm going to go this way, that way, this way, that way, but eventually I have to get to the other side of this. So instead of putting all our energy into that resistance and avoidance, we say, right, okay, I'm going through this, here I go, and just take one step at a time, trusting that the next step will reveal itself when you're ready, and just take that one step at a time. Then, it's so much less energy, and it never ends up being as hard as it could be, as hard as the mind can perceive it to be, because it doesn't carry all of that avoidance and resistant energy with it. Yeah.
I just had like a visual picture in my head then about, and we were talking about this before as well, before we jumped on and hit record, was that, for me in this process of writing, the how just keeps on coming up, and it's like how. But like you said, you've just got to take one foot in front of the other, because you cannot stand on the edge of a river and think your way across the river. And think of all the possible scenarios of the ways you could get across the river and all the things that could happen on the way of getting across the river. You're better off just like going into the river and then dealing with what comes at you while you're in the river. It takes a lot less energy and a lot less time.
Yeah, and then as you're crossing the river, some gorgeous, 500-year-old turtle sticks its back up, and you can take a step on the back of that. Like, help comes to get you across the river that you didn't see coming. And and that's exactly what happens. How is such a waste of time. If we need to know how, we'll know in that moment. And we need to focus on what we want, and the how is just worry. And, as many have said before me, worry is just a prayer for what you don't want. And so, the how isn't what's important. What you want is what is important, the feeling of what you want. And we can only get to that by growing into the feeling of readiness for it, one step at a time. And then life, when we don't have all that conflicting energy, within us, then life can actually bless us with surprises or show us very clear directions on the how, on what the next step is. And, I've been blessed with some incredible surprises at the 11th hour, and they usually are at the 11th hour because we don't actually need them until then. And any need for them before that is only fear, is only serving fear. But at the time that you need it, if you don't have all that conflict and you can actually surrender, and it's faith, it's trust and faith in life that it will come, and it does, and it does. I mean, I've been one day up from recording my first album and had no idea how I was going to pay for it, and a complete stranger I met that night gave me $5,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So things like that can happen. Things like that do happen. They do happen.
Yeah. I had someone say to me, a friend of mine just say to me recently, this is all being created for you.
Yes.
And I was just like, wow, okay. That's comforting in some way when you are in the suffering, because then the suffering has a purpose,
Yes.
And when the suffering has a purpose, then it's easier for you to accept it and, I guess, surrender. And then there's this other element of the faith too, right? Because the faith that things will show up when you need them. And that's so easy to say.
Yes.
Quite hard to live.
Well, it's like anything. You get better with practice. So the smaller things, you keep remembering the smaller things that have come your way when you've needed them, the solutions that you've needed, whether that's just a conversation with a stranger or something physical coming into your life. You start looking at how life has actually supported you in small ways, and then the skill is in remembering those when you're full of fear and terror over how things are coming. You've got to stop and think, okay, well, I've survived this before, and the solution came when I needed it, and so that faith actually gets stronger and stronger. And so, I just find that it's a skill. I mean, there were times years ago where I've been in that place where I've thought, why am I even doubting this? I know this will work out. I've had this happen before. I've always
this is
worked
so
out.
where I'm at right now. Yep.
Yeah, it's always worked out. Why can't I remember all the times it's worked out? Why do I have to, serve this master of fear and get caught up in this old pattern? But every time I have that consciousness about that, it gives you ownership back of your own mind, and it's like, okay, well, hang on, even this moment while I'm questioning that is one less moment to fear. It's actually taking a little bit more consciousness and ownership back of my own mind that there have been times, of course, life has supported me before, and it will again, and my job is to dare to allow it, is to dare to receive it through whatever channel it's going to come. And often those channels are through other people, and we're so embarrassed or concerned at how, by our ego, how we'll look in the eyes of others, that we're not actually open to that receiving. Whereas if we learn to receive on a completely open level, we allow it to come however, because it gives other people the pleasure of giving, and we all know what a pleasure that is. But also it doesn't then dictate to life to say, okay, well, I want this and this, but I don't want this to come this way. It's just like, I'm going to trust here that you're doing this for me. You want me to enjoy my life. That's the biggest gift, the biggest gratitude we can show life, is to enjoy it. Life wants us to enjoy it. But we have to get to a point where we can actually allow it and receive it. And to do that, we have to let go of the how and just keep trusting layer by layer, and remind ourselves that we've supported before in life and we will be again.
Yeah, you've just inspired me, actually. I think after this call, I'm going to go and write a list of the ways that I have felt supported, or I've seen life come to support me, because listening to your story, like, some of the things are huge, like some person offering you $5,000 the day before you go to record, or hey, house ringing just as you're in labor with your daughter, but we all have those moments, but we often look at someone else's and feel that it's more extraordinary than our own. But sometimes things are relative too, you know? So it's like, for me, just when you were talking, I was thinking about the day that I walked on the beach crying my eyes out, like not knowing how I was going to pay rent that week, having this, you know, not knowing how I was going to get out of this commercial lease for my co-working space, feeling completely powerless, and then just being like, you know, having some kind of realization that it didn't really matter. Like the co-working space didn't really matter. And then losing attachment to it being a certain way and then asking for help. And it was like me crying on the beach saying, righto, I am ready for change. I'm ready to admit defeat on this one. You meet me in the middle. And I actually said that while I was walking on the beach. Universe, I'm fucking over this. Like, this is it for me. I am happy to walk away, but I need you to meet me in the middle. And then I got home and there was an email from a guy who was on the board of the Chamber of Commerce that I was volunteering on, and he had been to a couple of strategy sessions at my work, you know, at my office, and he wanted to sublet the space from me for the duration of the rest of the lease. And it's like that stuff happens, you know?
Yeah, it does. And it doesn't have to be, I mean, that's a major thing for you because of the intensity of what you are dealing with. And for me, those examples of Hay House and the album are big examples. But they also come in really small ways as well. You know, when I've been really, really broke, you know, there were times in my life where I was living on food vouchers from Vinnie's and the Salvos and stuff. And you know, that's as poor as you can get, where the only wardrobe you get are what the Salvos actually donate to you, not what you buy at the Salvos, because you haven't even got money to buy at the Salvos, so what they actually donate. So it really taught me how to receive on all levels. But sometimes, you know, when I've been that broke, I've just found $10 and there's my food for the day. Or someone's told me about, like I was living in Melbourne and someone told me about the Hare Krishnas down in Albert Park that have a feast every Sunday night. So all of a sudden on a Sunday night when I'm hungry, there's food. And it always, it can be as small as that. And I ran into someone the other day, someone I'd worked with 20 odd years ago, and she tried to get in touch with me a few times, and I said to her, look, I just don't have the time at the moment, you know, and I didn't. I just had to leave space for other things in my life. And then we just ran into each other, which was the way it was always meant to be. And she was really broke, and I ended up just giving her $100 and saying, look, you know, and telling her, you know, this is, people have done it for me. I can't count how many people have helped me in my life. I said, just take it. I ended up running into her again. Haven't seen her for 20 years, and I ran into her twice in like a week and a half. And what she'd done was she took the $100, went and bought heaps of ingredients, made up cakes and slices, went out in the neighbourhood, sold a stack of them, and then bought all the products, because she's training to be a beauty therapist, then bought all these products where she can start working from home now. And so that $100, I've given it to her based on my experience of, okay, go buy yourself some food for the week. And she's just grown it instantly. She's just grabbed it and thought, okay, what can I do with this? Turns $100 into like $450 or something, and then turns it into a workable income. And I just thought, okay, well, that is how life, you know, it's not black and white. She obviously her strongest wish wasn't food. It was to be able to work from home doing her beauty therapy. And it came to her as $100. And then she was told the next step. Yeah.
You know, the thing is that most of us aren't looking for the opportunity in things a lot of the time, you know, because we are so bogged down in our shit. While $100 could have served her well, maybe to buy some groceries, and that might have been your struggle at the time, her struggle was different, you know, and all it takes is to see the opportunity that you've been given rather than... Yeah, I don't know. There's like a different frame, right? When it's like,
it is.
This is an opportunity. Because for me, that guy, and I mean, we all hit our knees, you know, at some point or another. It doesn't have to be, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to pay rent. I don't know how, you know, I'm about to lose everything, fall to our knees. It's relative. So it's relative to where you are in that time and space. But we all hit our knees. But sometimes we don't even see the hand that's there to help us up.
Yes, yeah. And it also comes back to that how and just dealing with one step at a time. So, she may have been thinking, how can this, she was just dealing with that step, how can I get these products? And I've come along, and given her $100, and straight away she's taken that as a sign, this is the how. Whereas she might have been spending all her time thinking, how am I going to come up with $400 or $500 to buy these products? But obviously she wasn't, because she'd surrendered enough to attract this 100 for us to run into each other and then get the $100. Yeah, so it's also about just that level of surrender and being open to receiving for what it is. It's not all black and white. It's beautiful the way it works when we're open to it.
Yeah, when we're open to it. So there was something else that I wanted to explore with you, and that was really the upper limits. Mm-hmm. And at the same time as you getting this huge break with a publisher, having your daughter, like two amazing things that you've probably wanted for a very long time, are handed to you. And then immediately from there, your body starts to shut down. So what was that? Was that upper limit stuff, or was it just a gift? What did you see it as?
Yeah, it was all of that. It was definitely upper limit stuff. That's what I recognised it as first off. But it was also a perfect answer to a lot of prayers that I'd put out there, and including breaking through the upper limits. So yeah, sure. Straight away, I'd moved back to my hometown. There was some family dynamics going on where, I couldn't allow myself to shine or outshine anyone. And so as soon as I've got the baby, I've got the international publishing contract, and got all that happening, yeah, of course, sabotage. How can I ruin this? It can't all be this perfect and great. I can't allow this level of joy and ease and success. I'm going to outshine people. Let's find something to just make it let's take the glow off it and tarnish it a little bit, and tarnished it a hell of a lot.
Could have been done easier, perhaps.
I wish I wish I hadn't put such big prayers out there at the time. Holy dooly. But it really it helped me see that I had upper limits, and to realize that just as there's a point in the low point where we reach a point where we think, I cannot take any more pain or any more suffering or any more heartache, whatever, there is a point at the other end that says, I don't know how to let in any more happiness. I can't take any more happiness. I've got to sabotage this somehow, or even if it's in my expectations that it can't keep going this good for so long. And so recognizing that really helped me chip away at these upper limits, because we need to think, well, how good can I allow it? And if that scares the life out of you, it's like, okay, what's the fear here? And that's what you start working on, and recognizing and asking for healing on it, because there's no reason we can't live the life we want. I mean, I'm living a lot of the life I want now, not completely, and we'll always have bigger dreams, and we'll always be expanding into those dreams, but there's so much of my life is exactly and my prayers answered, but it was only through recognizing that I couldn't actually allow happiness in, that it scared me to be so successful. It scared me to outshine people in my family. And in the end, I realized that that's their path. This is my path. They've got their life, and we can all shine together or not. It doesn't make any difference. But if I'm going to shine in my life, well, it's up to me to actually allow myself to do so. And that's only by facing the fears that are, every time I bump my head on the next upper limit, I have to chip away at that. Yeah, for sure. One thing that came up while you were just talking was, the idea that, sometimes opportunity is $100 note from a friend who wants to help you. And sometimes opportunity is bone-crunching pain. It just depends on the frame that we're looking at it within. That has been one of the biggest gifts in your life, even though, well, I'm not sure that it has, but I'm pretty sure you will say that it has been. One of the biggest gifts in your life has been that process of coming out of the pain Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I still, I still live with pain on a whole different level now. And to me, it's just a teacher to continue going gently and just to, which is how I want to live anyway. So pain, it really took me to receive the level of pain that I did, to experience the level of pain, for me to realize that just because you do it tough doesn't mean you have to. We can be really strong and just keep taking on challenge after challenge because we're strong people. But there has to come a point where you just think, actually, I don't want to live like this. I'm a strong person. I can deal with it, whatever life gives me. But hang on a sec. I actually want to choose joy and ease from here on. But pain taught me how to say no, to give myself permission to say no, because there were times I simply had to say no. But what came through that was the ability to say no without guilt, even when I was feeling well. That it's like, actually, no. It's not going to leave me feeling as good as a day at home will, or a day with my girlfriends will, or it's and making those choices of my time very consciously, and pain has taught me how to do that. So it is one of the best things that's ever happened on so many levels.
And I think often we don't say no to things due to a sense of guilt and shame, really, but due to a sense of obligation or duty, or not wanting to let the other person down. But often saying yes to the things that we know we should say no to, sure, it doesn't serve us, but it also doesn't serve the other person or the other, whatever the other thing is.
Yeah, because we're not bringing our best self to it. And, if we say no and then bring our best self to what ignites us, and then the whole world benefits. And if that one person misses out and, gets the hump about it because you said no, well, sorry, that's life. And we really, our greatest obligation is to treat ourselves with love and gentleness in order to bring the most light and joy to the world we can. And that's how the world benefits, from us learning how to say no to the right things. Yes, and saying yes to the others.
Yeah, that's
yes.
Yeah. Love it. So what are your hopes for Bloom?
Well, it's like a child, you birth it, you go through the gestation of it, or you conceive it, you go through the gestation, you birth it, and then you guide it as lovingly as you can, but know that it's going to take on its own journey, and hope that it meets the people it's meant to meet along the way, and inspire and hope that you've given it enough foundations and good values that it will positively affect the people it meets along the way. So for me, I just want my greatest wish for Bloom is that it's received beautifully by those who it meets, and that those people feel inclined to share it on with others, and that it helps people realize that it's okay to live gently and to have space. Just leave space in your life. Yeah.
Cool.
About that. That'll do.
That'll do. That's probably enough. Time to kick up your feet and relax. It's on the couch. Biggest fear?
I'll cry if I say this one, probably, but not being able to play guitar again. Yeah, because my hands still don't work. They work to a degree, but they don't work how they used to. So I can play guitar a little bit now, which is more than I could a few years ago. But my biggest fear is not being able to express myself through that medium.
And what do you struggle with at the moment?
Cooking. My love of food and my love of sharing food gets lost in my commitment to eating really well because of my health. And so, it does have joy in it a lot of the time, but it doesn't have as much joy in it as it used to. So, cooking.
Failure. What does failure mean to you these days?
It's just a stop sign to say, you're going the wrong way, go this way instead. Yeah.
And what about, like, you know, we all have that evil bitch in our head. Well, I hope we do. Most of us, everyone I've ever met does. What does yours kind of say to you? What do you hear the most?
Well, she doesn't have much say anymore because I've learnt to be really compassionate with myself, and so I can't. Maybe what she used to do is put too much pressure on me, you know, to reach a certain standard of living and a certain standard of, not perfection. I've never been, you know, aiming for perfection, but I have expected a lot of myself. So that, you know, just and now I'm actually a bit compassionate toward her and say, well, thanks, honey, but yeah, I don't actually have to live like that now. Yeah,
that's cool. And what does success mean to you now?
Success means living the life you want, irrespective of how you're perceived in the public eye.
Yeah. And freedom. What does freedom look like?
Space. Space just to do the things that make you happy and to leave room for spontaneity. That's freedom. Yeah.
The Plug. Instead of filling the podcast with self-promotion, we're being totally transparent. Here's The Plug.
All right, BronnieWare.com is my website. I'm about to embark on an Australian tour, which is a very rare and special occasion. I'll be in Brisbane on the 4th of May, and that's followed by Melbourne on the 6th, and Sydney on the 18th, and Perth on the 20th of May. And they're going to be incredibly beautiful events which will have lots of growth in them, but also lots of connection and fun and music, and they're rare, so get along right now and get your ticket.
And grab a copy of Bloom too while you're at it.
Well, Bloom's included in the ticket price.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So even better. Yeah, come along and get Bloom that way.
The takeaway. Exercises or tips for positive change, sprinkled with salt and vinegar, wrapped in newspaper and handed over the counter from our special guest to you.
That the greatest gratitude we can show to life is to enjoy it well. Totally. That's it.
Simple.
Simple, short and sweet.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Bronnie. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolute pleasure, Carly. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Carlosophies podcast with me, Carly Nimmo. Let's continue the conversation at carlynimmo.com. If you were a big fan of the podcast, I'd be stoked if you left a review. And if you want to hear more radness just like this, be sure to subscribe and spread the word. In the meantime, be real, be rad. Peace out.